Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending today's training, our virtual training from AFM. AFM volunteers are happy to provide this training to you, and we are excited today to have James with us as our presenter. You're encouraged to share what you learned from this training with your colleagues. Training is provided free of charge. It does not include a certificate of attendance at this time. The training will be recorded, and whenever possible, we will make those recordings available on AFM's YouTube channel for future viewing. We encourage you, if you missed a training, most of our trainings are now up on YouTube, so we'd love to have you go back and refresh yourself or learn something new. Since this is a 1-hour training, we're going to begin right away after a quick devotional from Jose with the training. We'd like to encourage you to introduce yourself in the chat. And then at the end of the training, our fire safety advocate, Jose, will be hosting tea time. You're invited to stay, network, ask further questions about the training, or discuss other pertinent topics to the fire service. Please be sure to keep your microphones muted throughout the training. But if you have questions during the training, please unmute yourself so that you may ask. And now Jose is going to get us started with a word of encouragement.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you for the opportunity. It is nice for to have you, Mr. James, in the meeting, and I welcome everybody who's available. So today we shall not be reading anything from the book. I just felt to encourage all of us of how far we have come. So far, this is going to be our 9th meeting, and I'm really encouraged with the commitment that you have. And such a commitment shows that you are committed even in the fire service. You see, that is actually how to show that you're reliable in your fire service, just by these small gestures that you give. We are very encouraged that you find time to come. And even God encourages us, even when he was here on earth, Jesus Christ, that once you're called to do a service, just like the 12 disciples, you follow, you follow what Christ did, and even in the fire service, for your information, the first person who started the fire service was a preacher, and he followed Christ's teachings, and even that's why you find that in the fire service we are paramilitary. We actually follow the orders given either by the duty officer or the battalion chief or the fire chief. So by you actually being here, you're showing that commitment, and you're showing that reliability that you can be relied on even on the fire ground. So thank you for being here and everything that you do in these classes. We appreciate you very much. So I'll say a prayer and then we shall start. Dear Heavenly Father, even as we start off this meeting, we ask you that you be with us. You give us stable internet connection, and even you remind the people who are supposed to log in to find time and log in. We thank you for Mr. James, our instructor, that Lord, you encourage him, you give him the confidence to take us through. We pray all this trusting and believing in Jesus' name. Amen. Take it away, Mr. James Mwangi.
So welcome everyone on board. So today we'll be going through Doffing and Doffing, and Madam Nancy Moore will be the one for us, who will be highlighting for us the session on the other end. So we'd like to say thank you for the moments that you have taken and the time that you will wish to spend for us. So today, as we start our session, then probably we'll start our session by showing you what we have with me. It's a helmet that one of it provides a safety, a major major role whenever we go to any building or structural firefighting building. And one of the roles is it helps you to fight fires. And whenever you have the helmet, then with it in front of it, it got what we called a face, a visor. The visor will prevent you from coming across into contact with any fluids or anything. And then the helmet, according to NFPA 1971 standards, then it will be of assistance whenever any object falls from above may not come into you. So welcome everyone. This is your moment. I treasure it so much. Please, Mansimo, take it from the next slide. So today we'll have some of the objectives, and one of the objectives will be list the components of personal protective equipment of the structural firefighting ensemble. And we'll find that some of the components, as I've shown you, will be a helmet. Another one will also be a protective hood, boots, and also we'll be able to describe the type of protection provided by the structural firefighting ensemble, of which some of the protection that firefighting ensemble provides is a minimum, that you will be able to go into any building and be able to put off a fire, but the amount of fire within the building does not mean that you, with your personal protective equipment, it may not burn. Some of our firefighters have the idea that whenever they go into a building that has a fire with the personal protective equipment, at the end of the day, they may not be burned. That is a wrong idea that we have, of which we should have something else like we need to know the environment before we go into the building with our protective personal gears. Explain how each design element of a fire helmet works to protect the head, the face, and the eyes. Remember, we'll have different designs of helmets that have been constructed. All the way we'll find that we have helmets constructed for fire chief. We'll also have helmets constructed for assistant fire chief with the rankings all the way to the normal firefighters. But all in all, we'll find that all of us are firefighters at the end of the day, that our duty is to save life and protect property loss. Next slide, please. So we'll be able to explain why protective hoods are part of the structural firefighting ensemble. You will find that the protective hoods are made of Nomex, a material that it does not burn, but until it attains a certain temperature, it will burn. But for a moment, it will protect you from being burned around your face. And probably if you're a firefighter, then you wouldn't need to have probably the hairs, all right? You need to have probably shaven your hair well. And also we'll be able to explain how each design of a helmet, of a turnout coat, works to protect the upper body. You'll find that a turnout coat's got 3 layers. And with the 3 layers that it got, each layer of the turnout coat plays a different role. You'll find that we have a protective outer gear, and one of the major roles that a protective outer gear prevents us from is cuts, because it's a heavy layer that it's also made from Nomex. And then last but not least, we'll also be able to describe how each design element of boots works to protect the feet. You'll find that boots may have 2 layers, the same way like a hose or a hosepipe. And with the boots having 2 layers, you'll find that inside the boots, they'll have a material that will prevent any heat from going out and will prevent heat from out coming in. So at the end of the day, the lower parts of the boots will have heavy material that we may be able with it to step even into a water that's got electricity, and at the end of the day probably you will not be electrocuted. Next please, Nancy. So we'll be able to see also and describe how each design elements of gloves works to protect the hands and wrists. You'll find that different elements of gloves, one is made of pure leather and another one is made of material that comes out from different animals, all right? So you'll find that at the wrists will have different, that they will be able to prevent anything going through your skin. Remember, when donning PPE, it should be able to cover all around your body, that your body will not be exposed at the end of the day to anything, all right? And also we'll be able to list the limitations of PPE. Limitations, these are the disadvantages that come along with us wearing the personal protective equipment. And one of them probably will be, you'll not be able to move as fast as any other person will be able to move at that moment. Also, you'll be able to explain the role of firefighters' work uniform as part of the PPE ensemble. Remember, when donning or doffing this equipment, probably inside your body, you do not require to wear materials that can be burned easily when the heat temperature rises. So, meaning that when the heat temperature rises inside your body, you shouldn't be having anything that is made out of cotton, because at the end of the day, if it's there, then the heat will rise and the cotton probably may burn. Next slide, please, Natsuma. So we'll also be able to describe how to inspect the condition of PPE. Remember, whenever you go or before you leave the station, preparing to go and do a rescue or go and do or put off a fire, then you should have been able, or you should have done it earlier to inspect your PPE. Remember, if your PPE is torn or your PPE has any cut around it, then it may be a possibility that at the end of the day, while you're playing your duty of putting out a fire, then you may get injured if you didn't inspect your PPE. We'll also describe how to properly maintain PPE. Remember, after you're done with your PPE, always follow the normal procedures, follow the normal norms, and you will be able to maintain your PPE and it will serve you for a long time. So last but not least, we'll get to describe the specialized protective clothing required for vehicle extrication and wildland fires. You'll find that these are some of different type of fires that we may be tackling, or some of different activity at the end of the day, like vehicle extrication. For vehicle extrication, it may require us to wear a different type of glove. Instead of us now wearing a material that is made of leather, this time around we'll be wearing a material that is made of latex, so that we can be able to access the patient easily, we can be able to open the door easily, and it's not, at the end of the day, it's swift to remove and put on another one if the patients are more than one. And for wildland fire, it's the same possibility that we do not require to have heavy gloves or heavy duty uniforms like as for structural firefighting. Now, for wildland fires, then we'll require that we'll have lighter ones that will enable us to go as per the speed of the wind. Remember, the speed may be moving faster than us, then, but we'll have to catch up with it at a certain moment. And when we catch up with it at that moment, then it requires to be lighter so that we can be able either to duff it or we can be able to put it off at that moment. We are not so sweaty inside, and also we are fighting. As for structural firefighting, you'll find that the materials themselves, at the end of the day after donning them, you'll be weighing up to about 25.5 pounds, about 5 kg of just wearing the personal protective equipment. Next slide, once more. So last but not least, we will be able to list the complete sequence of donning PPE, and the complete sequence protect him from anything that is coming from outside. Remember also, from the back part, he will be able to wear the turnout coat. A turnout coat that is made also of 3 layers that will be able to protect him from moisture, will be able to protect him from burns, will be able to protect him from cuts. And remember, while we're fighting fire, any liter of water will be pouring onto the fire may be coming out as small droplets that may burn us at the end of the day. Then you'll find that the layer of the PPE that the person will be wearing at that moment needs to capture the moisture, and it will not go inside to the body so that it may not harm the patient. Next, please. So as we start our today course, we'll find that we say that PPEs got 2 safety components used by our firefighters need special considerations. And these of special considerations, the 2 equipment that need special consideration is the personal protective equipment. And we'll find that the personal protective equipment got limits that we should not exceed. And we should not have the mind that whenever we have personal protective equipment, at the end of the day, we may not be banned. We need to know to what level does this type of PPE requires me, or which type of fire do I wear so that I can be able not to be injured at the end of the day. And then we'll have self-contained breathing apparatus. At the end of the day, will be protecting us against respiratory risks. Respiratory risks, this meaning that our lungs need special air all the time. And if you get the chance of breathing, welcome to see another day. Next slide, please. So PPE protects the body against a limited amount of heat, as I usually told you. So you need to be so very careful when dealing with any type of fire, and more so structural fire. When you'll be going to fight a structural fire, and more so be not a defensive but an offensive structural fire, it requires you to go to the seat of the fire. And that means that you need to go inside the building so that you can be able to put off the fire. Remember, there are very many incidents that happens while you are going to fight a fire that is inside the building. So with your PPE will protect you against the heat, but a little amount. So you need to tell yourself, which type of fire am I fighting? And remember that a fire has levels, and as it grows, then you need to know, when do I retreat? When do I continue fighting the fire? Last but not least, in our introduction, we'll find that SCIBA allows firefighters to enter smoky and toxic areas and provide respiratory protection for limited time. Yes, you may have the SCIBA, but the SCIBA will allow you, if you have good lungs and you have prepared to fight a fire with using a SCIBA, then the SCIBA will allow a time limit of 40 minutes only, not exceeding that. And if you tend to use it faster, then it may go beyond less than 40 minutes. So before you enter into any structural firefighting or you're doing any rescue, then check the amount of air inside your SCIBA so that at the end of the day, you will not be able to be captured earlier with the amount of air that is within your cylinder, or you will not be injured. Remember, our respiratory plays a very big role, that at the end of the day, we'll need our respiratory to be pure. Remember, most of our fighters at the end of the day, probably you may suffer from AMI, what we call myocardial infarction. Some of the diseases that probably may hinder us from living a long life. So for us to prevent such kind of diseases, then you need to wear respiratory protection. And in short form, they refer to it as SCIBA, and in long form, they refer to it as self-contained breathing apparatus. Next slide, please. So our personal protective equipment, from the start now, we'll be able to see essentials to a firefighter's safety. What are some of these essentials? We'll find that these essentials to a firefighter's safety must provide full body coverage and protection from a variety of hazards. What are these variety of hazards that we may come across? One, it's cuts. The two are, whenever we go to fight structural fires, we'll find that we have glasses. We'll find that there are probably wires all around the building, that probably there is electricity on. Then, what are some of other hazards are the respiratory hazards, smoke. And with smoke comes along with different hazards. One of the hazards that smoke comes along with it's carbon dioxide, a release of carbon dioxide. Remember that the materials that may be burning at the end of the day matters. If it's wood, it may provide carbon dioxide. If it's plastic, it may provide phosgene, all right? With that one, now they will give you a time limit. For carbon dioxide, we say smoke kills faster than even the fire. Then at the end of the day, we need to be able to provide ourselves full body coverage. Not only that, but also respiratory protection. Remember, end of the day must be cleaned, maintained, and inspected regularly, meaning that after end of every fire that you fight, at the end of the day, if you get to go into a fire and you have done properly your PPEs, then before the end of the day, after coming from a fire, inspect your personal protective equipment and make it easy for you to be able to have prepared for another one, so that you do not jump into another one with a torn PPE. You do not jump into another rescue with a less breathing apparatus, or currently it doesn't have anything inside the cylinder. Next slide, please, Ansimo. So these are some of the equipments that we usually do. And as you can see on the picture, on your right of the slides, you'll find that these structural firefighting ensembles enables firefighters to work in areas with high temperatures and toxic gases. What are these that enables us to work in environments that are very high temperature or toxic gases? As you can see on our right from the slides, you'll see a helmet, a hood just below the backpack, a backpack that has 3 layers, a turnout coat that also got 3 layers, a skibber on the left of the backpack, boots that may be able to protect you from different types of injuries. One, you may be able to enter with certain boots to even regions that got electricity. The boot may protect you up to about 5 watts of electricity. You may not be electrocuted at the end of the day, but it's not just boots. NFPA 1971 standard boots. And then we'll have gloves that are made of leather, right? With gloves that are made of leather, they'll protect you against cuts, they'll protect you against burns, they'll protect you against injuries that you may sustain as you are walking or working along the structural building. So we'll see designed to be worn with self-contained breathing apparatus. Apart from just the materials, the PPE, at the end of the day will be needed or be required to protect ourselves against respiratory protection. And at that moment, that's when we will chip in with self-contained breathing apparatus. Next slide, please, Nassimo. So structural firefighting ensemble enables to provide protection furnished by the personal protective equipment. We have some of them as they're listed down in table 3.1. You'll be able to see that we have provides thermal protection. With thermal protection, we'll say the outer layer of the turnout coat provides the thermal protection. You'll find that repels water. The inner layer of the turnout coat, of which is the second layer, will be able to repel water. And lastly, provides impact protection. As you have seen back then in or on the back up band around the knees, it was a different color. It was not orange. So at that's where it gets to provide impact protection. Impact protection is when probably we are wearing boots. And with boots, then if anything falls onto your toes, then they may not be injured at the end of the day. And probably we'll also say that with impact protection, the helmet serves very right at that moment with impact protection. As you can see that inside the helmet, probably there is a layer. That's the helmet inside. There's space in between. So whenever the object will land onto the helmet, then the impact will not be directly referred to your head, but it will be referred to the surface of the helmet and not on to you. Protects against cuts and abrasions. Those are the gloves that will protect you against cuts and abrasion as you will be walking along to go and do a rescue. Then the gloves that you will be wearing, the backup pants that you'll be wearing, the turnout coat that you'll be wearing will be providing the protection against cuts and abrasion. Furnishes padding against injury. So you'll find that at the end of the day while you are walking, there's friction being caused. So with the furnished padding onto the end of or at the elbow and also at the knees that are provided with the protective gears that you'll be wearing, that is the turnout coat and also the backup pant, you'll find that the pain or the abrasion may not be occurring at that moment. Lastly, but not least, provide respiratory protection. And as we all know, respiratory protection will be provided by the self-contained breathing apparatus, of which it is limited to an amount of 40 minutes for a person or a firefighter who's well capable and has trained well to use the self-contained breathing apparatus. Those are just some of the protection that are furnished by the personal protective equipment. Next slide, please, let's move. So, as we have said, we can see we have an helmet that must meet NFPA 1971 standards. So what do NFPA 1971 standards say? You'll find that with 1971 standard, you'll find that the helmet, it's not as usual as for the ones that people use probably to go and just go and do any rescue of any kind. At this moment, the NFPA 1971, it requires that the helmet must have a visor, all right? And apart from just a visor, the helmet, in between the helmet, there should be space that whenever the object may fall onto you, then the impact will not be directed to you directly, but it will be directed to the surface of the helmet. And as you can see, the one we have on the slide, it has an eagle in front. For different countries have different designs of helmets. And that's saying so, you'll find that we'll have now the VETA collection. As you go and do your research on the VETA collection, then you will be able to see the different kinds of helmets that have been designed since back then when fire was introduced or fire had been begun here on our world. So helmet provides impact protection against falling objects. That is, if you are working on a high roof and the building tends to collapse, anything that will collapse and probably hit your helmet, then it will provide impact protection. Often color-coded according to rank and function. For any other firefighter may be wearing a helmet as the one that you can see on the slide on your right. Then you'll be able to see that often they are colored according to ranking, according to the ranks that you'll be having. So which rank are you having? Are you just a fellow firefighter? Or are you just a captain, a battalion chief? Are you the chief himself? With that, then the helmets will be color coded according to the rank that you possess into or onto the ground at that moment or onto your station. Remember that helmet must have a label permanently. The helmet must have a label permanently. Like for the ones that we can see in front of us within the slide, it has an eagle. The label is an eagle referring to the state which designs that type of helmet that people use along their country. Next slide, please. Then we talk of protective hood. The protective hood covers the exposed skin. Which exposed skin? That is the neck and the face, probably also with the skull. When we're talking of the skull, we're talking of the layer on top of the skull, which holds the hair. So also it gets to protect the ears, the nose, the eyes. So any skin that may be exposed at the moment when dealing with a fire. So whenever you wear a protective hood, it will just leave your eyes and the nose. Probably you can be able to see what is taking place as you're fighting a fire. You'll find that it's constructed of flame-resistant materials, and one of these flame-resistant material, we call it Nomex. We're not saying that it will not burn. It will burn, but it depends with the temperatures that are available at that moment. Remember, worn over the face piece, but under the helmet. When wearing the hood, it is worn over the face piece, but under the helmet. Not the other way around, that you can probably go and wear it on top of the helmet and not beneath it. You need to wear the hood under the helmet over the protective gear. We'll be able to see when we'll be demonstrating through our practical skill. Next slide, please. So as I told you, you'll find that the turnout coat has 3 layers. And one of these 3 layers is the protective outer shell. The protective outer shell will prevent us directly from the heat or from materials that are coming out from the cuts, all right, that are being there. And then we'll have the moisture barrier. Remember, we have steam. Whenever we apply water onto the heat, then at the end of the day, the heat gets to release steam as a cooling effect so that the material will be left behind will cool. So the steam may burn you, but when wearing a turnout coat with 3 layers, it has the second layer called the moisture barrier. Then it will prevent you from being burned with the moisture. And then we talk of, last but not least, the thermal barrier. Now, this with the thermal barrier, we're talking coming into contact directly with the heat itself, the fire itself. So the thermal barrier will prevent us from losing any heat from the body, and also from no heat from outside penetrating in and causing harm unto your body. You'll find with the turnout coat, it's got what we refer to as a flap. The flap, along the flap, you'll find that it has what we refer to as a zip, and it tends to cover the zip, hence providing a double seal, of which it is very secure at that moment, that you will operate, the flap will not go off, and your zip may not be dropped whenever you are working or dealing with a fire, a structural firefighting, offensive fighting the fire. So you'll find that with the flaps comes in 2 ways. We have, or comes in 2 styles, that is the long and the short. For the long one, it's the one that protects you all the way from the torso itself. That's the thorax and the abdomen that is applied on top of the zip. And for the short one, you'll find that we usually apply it around the neck. That provides also a seal that the hood will not be exposed at the end of the day when it is tucked inside the skin. Remember, when donning personal protective gear, it should and supposed to cover all around your body, that your body part is not exposed. Next slide, please. So the back band constructed to match the turnout coat. And that's saying, so it will find that it has the protective layer. You'll find that it has the moisture barrier. And also you'll find that it has the thermal barrier. Those are the 3-layer protective system that comes along with the back band and the turnout coat. Should be large enough to don quickly and move easily. Remember, whenever in each institution or the institution that you are working for, you should have your turnout coat. It should not be so fitting that probably you are using it to go out like a date or probably anything else. The turnout coat should be large enough. Remember that when the turnout coat is large enough, it allows you to wear or to don the PPE at a minimum time, of which the minimum time is 1 minute. So 1 minute at the end of the day, you'll be able to see that you'll have access and you will have done a proper donning of the equipment. That's saying so your backup band is large enough for you to go through in with both of your legs, and at the end of the day, you'll not be injured, or it will not take time for you to don. Next slide, please. Let's move. We'll see another layer, another gears of the protective boots. We'll have the boots constructed of probably rubber or leather. And as you can see, we have both of them. On your right, the top one is constructed of leather. The lower one is constructed of rubber. So we are not saying the normal boots that people usually go with to the farm. This time round, these boots, inside the boots, they have got different materials. And that's why you see they say the boots must meet NFPA 1971 requirement. That's saying so that 1971 NFPA requirements is the outer layer is constructed of different material, but the inner layer is constructed of thermal barrier, that it will prevent heat from going through into your body. And at the end of the day, it will prevent you from coming across or going into contact with the heat at that moment. Outer layer, you'll find that it repels water and is flame and cuts resistance. That's doing so that you will not come into contact at any moment with the layer that is on the outside. And the inner layer or the inner liner adds thermal protection. That when wearing your boots and while you are inside the structure fighting a fire, at the end of the day, you will not be injured in any form. At the end of the day, you will be provided with protection. That's saying so, a thermal protection. By the word thermal, we're talking of heat. You will not come into contact with heat at any moment. Next slide, please. Let's move. So we have gloves, protect from heat, liquid vapors, cuts, and penetration. And you'll find that the gloves are constructed of heat-resistant leather. And as you will see with the gloves, they require wristlets, not the ones that people usually wear, but it has been built, it's inbuilt within the gloves, that it provides a protection. So after wearing probably everything that a personal protective equipment requires, NFPA 1971, according to NFPA 1971, then the last thing that you will be donning will be the gloves. And the gloves will provide protection all right, against heat resistance, and also will provide protection against cuts and anything that might tend to penetrate your arm at that moment. So while it is covering the turnout coat that you will be wearing, whatever will be holding the turnout coat so that it either does not go up or go low, so that you can be able to access anything. If it is a patient or if it is a protecting the materials that are inside that building, then the wristlets will be providing that protection of holding your turnout coat so that at the end of the day, your arm is not exposed. Next slide, please, Nancy. So we've got the limitations of structural firefighting ensembles. And one of the limitations of the structural firefighting ensembles, task requires energy and strength. And as I've said so, that wearing this personal protective equipment, it weighs up to about 25.5 pounds, all right? Which is, when you divide it by 2.2, it may give you around 5 kg. And by saying so, 5 kg is a heavy material wearing all through and going into a building. Then you need to have practiced well, and of which at the end of the day, it becomes tiresome. It requires energy and strength. And then it retains body heat and perspiration. Whatever the heat, the amount of heat that your body releases, the thermal barrier will not allow it to be exposed to the atmosphere at the end of the day. Meaning what? That if you're sweating too much, at the end of the day, you will feel the heat and it will not be exposed to the environment until probably you have a time what we call rehabilitation, and of which when fighting a fire, probably rehabilitation requires you after probably 80 minutes of being inside a rescue, and you're probably done with doing a rescue. That's when you can go and do a rehab. So becoming a disadvantages at our end, we as the firefighters. Limits mobility and range of motion. Remember, the range of motion is the ability probably of the arm to extend to its fullest and reach an object. Or if it's the arm, it can go 360. But probably while wearing the personal protective equipment, and more so the structural firefighting personal protective equipment, it may prevent your arm from going all around 360. And if it will be able to go 360, then it will go around with a difficulty. Limit mobility, we're talking of movement from one point to the other. Then it will tend that if you are not wearing the personal protective equipment, you may be able to move faster. But when wearing the personal protective equipment, and more so the structural firefighting equipment, then your motion will be cut short, hence being a disadvantage at our end. Then we talk of the senses, abilities that we have. And as we all know, probably I'll allow at this point for people to probably ask, tell me the type of senses that probably they have. You'll find that Willie Githuki, you may please tell us one of the senses that probably we do have. Willie Githuki, you please tell us one of the senses that your body probably have. Yes, Willie.
Sight.
So what's one of the senses that your body capability?
Yes, the sight.
The sight, right?
Yes.
So, Peter Muturi. So another type of sensory that we have probably.
We have sense of hearing.
Sense of hearing, all right?
Yeah.
Okay. James Kibet.
We have sense of touch.
Sense of touch. Benson. Please, Benson. Francis Njoroge. Which other sense do we have?
Smell.
Smell, all right? Peter Lakers, another smell probably, or another sensor. Or we already have all the 5 senses.
And common sense.
All right, Joseph. Joseph, we would love for you to finish for us the last one, the last sense probably. Joseph Munjiri.
I was for common sense. Is there another sense?
All right then. So with that, we'll find that we have decreases normal sensory abilities. That's the sense of touch, the sense of smell, the sense of sight, right? And also the common sense when making decision. Remember, when inside the building, wearing $25 kgs, you'll find that at the end of the day, you may be having a problem with this type of senses. So with the limitation of structural firefighting example, you will not be able probably to make good judgment when inside that building. You'll not be able to smell what type of gas is being released or what type of information is being passed to you at that moment. Remember, when wearing the hood, wearing the face piece, there are some of the people who are catastrophic, meaning that they have the phobia of being in confined spaces. So with you being in a confined space, at the end of the day, you'll find that the sight will be affected. Next slide, please, Nansimo. So working uniforms. We will be required to wear clothes that clothing containing nylon or polyester may melt. So whenever you go into a building or reporting to working stations, you can see probably those like who can see Justin Gunjeri, whatever he's wearing on the other end are materials that it is not made of nylon, nor is it made of polyester. You'll find that whenever we go into buildings, and more so fighting structural firefighting, we'll find that we need clothing that probably are made of now the fire-resistant materials. Of one of them is the Nomex, right? So synthetic fibers are resistant to high temperature. So any clothing you may wear, but let it be according to the standard operating procedures of your institution, and let them be made of probably synthetic fibers and not of nylon or polyester at the end of the day, so that when you're fighting fire, remember that the disadvantages or the limitations that we're being shown, one of it is that you will not be able to release the amount of temperature from your body, because the layers that you'll be having does not allow any heat to come out of the body or any heat from outside to come into the body. Next slide, please, Nansimo. So donning and doffing PPE, donning PPE must be done in a specific order to obtain maximum protection, right? And what is this specific order? We are saying that when you're donning your PPE, then you should start with donning the protective hood. First, you lay the protective hood onto your head, then you will put into your legs onto the backpant and to the boot directly, not wearing the backpant first, but the backpant and the hood will go into directly next. And from there, probably the next thing that will be needed to don, then it will be the turnout coat. After donning the hood, you'll be needed to don the boot and the backpant, and from the boot and the backpant, you'll be needed to don the turnout coat. And from the turnout coat, then you will be needed to don the helmet. And from the helmet, then you will be needed to put on now the flap that was there initially, and of which this flap was either a short one or a long one that provides a double seal at the end of the day around the neck so that you can be able to cover. And then after you're done with donning the hood and the turnout coat, then you need to put on your skiba. You put on your skiba, you fasten the harnesses, you put on your mask, your face mask, and then on top of the face mask, you'll get to apply your hood. And from there, after the hood, then probably you'll put on your helmet. And as a last result, you'll put on your gloves. And at the end of the day, you'll have fully provided a maximum protection and not any part of your body will be exposed. So to doff will be the reverse of whatever I have said. It will be just the reverse, the procedure used in getting dressed, of which it will be the gloves will go first, the regulator probably will be the next, the helmet will be the next, release the hood, probably remove the face mask and the skiba now from your back. Then you get to remove the turnout coat, place it on the ground probably or where you had initially picked it so that it is ready for the next deployment of duty, and also remove the backup pant together with the boots. And last but not least, you'll get to remove your hood and place it on top of the boots and the backup pant, as in you are ready for another deployment in case an incident comes in while you are resting or probably training while being inside your institution. Next slide, please, Nansimo. So care of PPE, we're talking of care of the personal protective equipment that mostly we use with structural firefighting. These equipment are very expensive, and at the end of the day, we need to protect them. How do we protect them? Check the conditions of the PPE regularly, meaning that before and after going into any rescue, then you need to have checked your personal protective equipment. Repair, worn, or damaged PPE at once. Whenever it gets damaged or it is worn out, then you need to report it according to the standard operating procedures that you'll be working upon at that moment at any institution. Then clean PPE when necessary, all right? Clean PPE when necessary. These are not just normal clothes. These are not just normal clothes. These are clothes probably that they'll be providing you with protection. At the end of the day, then we'll talk of then badly soiled by exposure, and also we'll talk of exposed to chemicals or hazardous materials. Whenever you go into structures that probably will be containing chemicals or hazardous materials, then you will need to be able at the end of the day to wash or cleanse your personal protective equipment so that they'll be ready for the next deployment and they will not be providing any injury next to you. So follow the manufacturers, all right? Follow the manufacturer's conditions. Next slide, please, Nansimo. So specialized protective clothing, these are the vehicle extrication. PPE is generally lighter and more flexible than the structural firefighting. And as I had said earlier, when we were going through our objectives, you will see that I will have said that we have different types of gloves that we'll be wearing at this end. And this time around, we'll not be wearing a leather one. We'll be wearing a latex one that will be able to fit in. And probably if you have more than one patient, then probably we can be able to remove and wear another one, remove and wear another one, because different patients will require now you to have a new glove so that you can be able to attend and will not be transmitting or be taking cross-infection from one person to the other. So eye protection also should be worn, of which these are just some of the other parts of equipment that probably we should be worn. At this time round, we will not be wearing probably our helmets that they contain visor. They will be providing eye protection, but probably they will be having the goggles themselves that you'll need to wear them so that they may prevent you from splash or probably blood that is splashing from the patient. Next slide, please, Nansimo. So at the end of the day, we've got the summary. The skip breathing conserves air. we'll have the skipper must be checked. Skipper must be checked. The cylinders are refilled via compressors and follow the 18 steps to correctly don the PPE.
To thank you, James, for the training today. We're very grateful for that. And to all of you for participating.